The bullies had no idea. They just slapped the wrong girl. Now they'll pay. Maya Rodriguez had always preferred the shadows. At 17, she possessed the kind of quiet presence that allowed her to slip through crowded hallways unnoticed, her dark hair falling like a curtain across her face. She was small-framed, barely 5 feet tall, with gentle brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything while revealing nothing. When her family moved to Riverside High in the middle of junior year, Maya hoped she could maintain her invisible status until graduation. Riverside High was a sprawling brick building that housed nearly 2,000 students, its long corridors echoing with the constant chatter of teenagers navigating their social hierarchies. The school had a reputation for academic excellence, but like most high schools, it also harbored its share of predators who fed on the vulnerable. Maya learned this lesson within her first week. It started small, as these things often do. Jessica Morrison, a tall blonde with perfectly styled hair and an expensive wardrobe that screamed privilege, was the undisputed queen of the junior class. She ruled her domain with ruthless efficiency, flanked by her lieutenants, Sarah Chen, a sharp-tongued girl who seemed to take genuine pleasure in others' discomfort, and Brittany Walsh, whose cruel laugh could cut through a crowded room. They had noticed Maya immediately, not because she stood out, but precisely because she tried so hard not to. "Look at the little mouse," Jessica had whispered loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear during Maya's second day. "Does she even speak English?" The comment stung, not just because of its casual racism, but because Maya understood exactly what Jessica was doing, establishing dominance through public humiliation. Maya had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility. In her previous school in California, she had learned that drawing attention only brought trouble. What Jessica and her crew didn't know, what nobody at Riverside High could possibly imagine, was that Maya Rodriguez carried within her small frame the accumulated knowledge of 12 years of intensive martial arts training. Her father, Miguel Rodriguez, was a former Special Forces operative who had opened a small dojo after retiring from military service. From the age of 5, Maya had trained in Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai. She could disarm an attacker in seconds, break bones with surgical precision, or render someone unconscious with a perfectly placed chokehold. But Maya had made herself a promise when they moved to Riverside. She would be normal. She would be just another teenage girl trying to get through high school without incident. Her father had taught her that true strength meant choosing when to use your power, and Maya had chosen peace. The bullying escalated gradually over the following weeks. Jessica and her friends would accidentally bump into Maya in the hallways, sending her books scattering across the floor. They would sit just close enough in the cafeteria to make loud, pointed comments about weird foreign girls who probably eat dogs. Sarah once dumped an entire bottle of water on Maya's desk just before a chemistry test, ruining her notes and forcing her to take the exam unprepared. Through it all, Maya remained silent. She cleaned up the spilled books, dried off her papers, and absorbed the humiliation with the same stoic calm her father had taught her to maintain under physical duress. Other students watched these incidents with the mixture of relief and shame that comes from knowing you're witnessing injustice but feeling grateful it's not happening to you. Teachers either didn't notice or chose not to see what was happening right under their noses. The worst incident occurred on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late October. Maya had been eating lunch alone in the far corner of the cafeteria, reading a book and trying to disappear into herself, when Jessica's group approached her table. The cafeteria was packed, hundreds of students talking and laughing, creating the perfect cover for what came next. "Hey, Mouse," Jessica said, sliding into the seat across from Maya. Sarah and Brittany flanked her on either side, forming a barrier that blocked Maya's escape routes. "We've been wondering something. Are you actually mute or just stupid?" Maya looked up from her book, meeting Jessica's cold blue eyes for just a moment before returning her attention to the page. This small act of defiance seemed to infuriate Jessica, whose face flushed red with anger. "I'm talking to you," Jessica hissed, reaching across the table to slam Maya's book shut. "The least you could do is pretend to have some manners." "Maybe she doesn't understand," Sarah chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe we need to speak slower. Musi, can you hear us?" The table erupted in cruel laughter as other students began to turn and stare. Maya felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but she forced herself to remain still. She could feel the familiar tension building in her muscles, her body's automatic response to threat, but she pushed it down. Violence was not the answer. It never was. "Leave me alone," Maya said quietly, her voice barely audible over the cafeteria noise. "Oh, she can talk!" Brittany exclaimed with mock delight. "Say something else, Mouse. Tell us about whatever weird country you crawled out of." "I was born in San Diego," Maya replied, still keeping her voice level and calm. "Sure you were," Jessica laughed. "And I'm sure your parents are totally legal too, right? Maybe we should call ICE and find out." The racist comment hung in the air like poison. Maya felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, but she maintained her composure. She had dealt with ignorance before. She could handle it again. What she couldn't handle was what happened next. As Maya stood to leave, balancing her lunch tray in one hand and her book in the other, Jessica stuck out her foot. Maya saw it coming but couldn't react fast enough while carrying her things. She went down hard, her tray flying through the air and sending food cascading across the floor. The sound of breaking dishes and Maya's body hitting the ground caused a momentary hush in the immediate area before erupting into laughter and jeers. Maya lay on the floor, covered in chocolate milk and mashed potatoes, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares. This was the moment she had nightmares about. Total public humiliation with no escape and no dignity left intact. She could hear Jessica and her friends laughing above her, could see other students pulling out their phones to record her misery. "Oops," Jessica said with theatrical innocence. "You should really watch where you're going, Mouse." Maya gathered herself slowly, methodically collecting her scattered belongings, while food dripped from her hair. No one offered to help. No teacher materialized to intervene. She was completely alone in a room full of people, and that isolation cut deeper than any physical pain could. The video of Maya's fall spread through social media within hours. By the next morning, it seemed like every student at Riverside High had seen it. Maya walked through the hallways to the soundtrack of whispered laughter and pointed fingers. Someone had even created a meme using a screenshot of her on the floor, with captions like, "When you try to be invisible but gravity has other plans." Maya's parents noticed her increasing withdrawal. Her mother, Carmen, tried to draw her out with gentle questions about school and friends, but Maya deflected every inquiry. Her father watched her with the careful attention of someone trained to read body language and stress indicators. He could see the signs of someone under prolonged psychological assault, but Maya refused to discuss what was happening. "Mija," he said one evening as they practiced forms in their garage dojo, "you know you can tell me anything, right? If someone is giving you trouble at school—" "I'm fine, Papa," Maya replied, executing a perfect spinning kick that would have dropped a grown man. "Everything's fine." But everything was not fine. The bullying was intensifying, becoming more creative and more public. Jessica had recruited additional followers, turning Maya's torment into a school-wide entertainment. They would follow her between classes, making animal noises and asking loudly if anyone had seen her green card. They created fake social media accounts to send her threatening messages. They even started a rumor that she had fleas, causing students to dramatically recoil whenever she passed. The breaking point came on a cold Friday afternoon in November. Maya had been assigned to stay after school to help her English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, organize books in the classroom storage room. She was alone, stacking novels on shelves, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. The rest of the school had emptied out hours ago, leaving the building nearly deserted except for a few teachers and maintenance staff. Jessica, Sarah, and Brittany appeared in the doorway like a pack of predators who had cornered their prey. The storage room was small and windowless, with only one exit, the door they were now blocking. "Well, well," Jessica said, stepping into the room with her trademark cruel smile. "Look what we found, the little mouse, all alone." Maya's heart began to pound, but she forced herself to continue stacking books. Maybe if she ignored them, they would get bored and leave. Maybe this would just be another verbal assault she could endure and forget. "We've been thinking," Sarah said, moving to Maya's left while Brittany circled to her right. "You've been at our school for months now, and you've never really introduced yourself properly. That's pretty rude, don't you think?" "Yeah," Brittany agreed, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. "We think it's time you showed us some respect." Maya finally turned to face them, her back now pressed against the storage shelves. 3 against 1, in an enclosed space, with no witnesses. She had been in similar situations during training, but this was different. These weren't practice partners or instructors testing her limits. These were predators who wanted to cause real harm. "I don't want any trouble," Maya said, proud that her voice remained steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Jessica laughed, a sound completely devoid of warmth or humanity. "You don't want trouble? Mouse, you are trouble. You're a problem that needs to be solved." "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah said, pulling out her phone and opening the camera app. "You're going to get on your knees and apologize for being such a pathetic waste of space. And you're going to beg us to be your friends. We're going to record the whole thing and share it with everyone. And if you don't," Brittany added, "we're going to make your life so miserable that you'll transfer schools." Again. Maya looked at each of them in turn, seeing the genuine malice in their eyes. They weren't just bullies anymore. They were predators who had finally isolated their prey and were ready to move in for the kill. She thought about her father's lessons on de-escalation, about walking away from fights, about being the bigger person. But there was nowhere to walk, and being the bigger person had only made her a bigger target. "No," Maya said quietly. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with renewed viciousness. "Excuse me," Jessica said, taking a step closer. "I don't think I heard you correctly." "I said no," Maya repeated, this time with more conviction. "I'm not going to do any of that." Jessica's face twisted with rage. In all her years of ruling through intimidation and humiliation, no one had ever simply refused her demands. Certainly not someone like Maya, small, quiet, powerless Maya, who had absorbed months of abuse without fighting back. "You little bitch!" Jessica snarled, raising her hand. The slap came fast and hard, Jessica's palm connecting with Maya's cheek with a sound like a gunshot in the small room. Maya's head snapped to the side, and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. The sting was immediate and sharp, but it was nothing compared to the wave of pure, crystalline clarity that washed over her. For months, Maya had been a victim. She had absorbed punishment, swallowed humiliation, and convinced herself that suffering in silence was the noble path. But in that moment, with her cheek burning and the taste of blood on her tongue, something fundamental shifted inside her. She was not a victim. She had never been a victim. She was a weapon that had chosen not to fire. That choice had just been revoked. Maya turned back to face Jessica with movements that seemed almost casual, but there was something different in her posture now. Her shoulders had squared, her stance had shifted to something more balanced and predatory. Most telling of all, she was smiling, not with warmth or humor, but with the cold satisfaction of someone who had finally been given permission to do what they were born to do. "That," Maya said softly, "was a mistake." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, probably to deliver another verbal assault or physical blow, but she never got the chance. Maya's movement was so fast it seemed to bend the laws of physics. One moment she was standing passively against the shelves, the next, Jessica was on the floor gasping for air, her legs swept out from under her by a technique so smoothly executed it looked like she had simply fallen. Sarah and Brittany stared in shock as their invincible leader struggled to get back to her feet. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maya was the victim, the target, the powerless one. She wasn't supposed to fight back, and she certainly wasn't supposed to be good at it. Jessica finally managed to stand, her face red with both embarrassment and rage. "You're going to pay for that, you little—" She lunged forward with her hands extended, clearly intending to grab Maya by the hair or clothing. It was a textbook amateur attack, the kind of wild, emotion-driven assault that Maya had been trained to counter since she was 7 years old. Jessica's forward momentum carried her directly into Maya's response, a simple hip throw that used the bully's own aggression against her. Jessica went airborne for a brief, terrifying moment before crashing into the storage shelves behind Maya. Books tumbled down around her as she slumped to the floor, the wind completely knocked out of her lungs. She looked up at Maya with something that might have been fear flickering in her eyes for the first time. Sarah, seeing her leader down and struggling, decided to rush in and help. It was a noble impulse that led to an ignoble result. Maya sidestepped Sarah's clumsy charge and caught her with a perfectly timed elbow to the solar plexus. Sarah doubled over, making a sound like a deflating balloon, before sinking to her knees beside Jessica. Brittany, the last one standing, looked between her fallen friends and Maya, who was now clearly revealed as something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Brittany had always been the follower in the group, the one who laughed at others' jokes and echoed others' cruelty. Faced with an actual threat, her courage evaporated like morning dew. "Please," Brittany whispered, backing toward the door. "We were just kidding around. We didn't mean anything by it." Maya studied her for a long moment, and Brittany could see something calculating and predatory in those dark eyes that had seemed so gentle and vulnerable just moments before. Maya took a step forward, and Brittany flinched as if she had been struck. "Just kidding around," Maya repeated thoughtfully. "Like when you poured water on my chemistry notes, like when you made animal noises in the hallway, like when you created fake accounts to send me death threats." "That wasn't me," Brittany said desperately. "That was all Jessica and Sarah. I just went along with it. I never wanted to hurt you." Maya tilted her head slightly, considering this claim. "But you did hurt me. Every laugh, every cruel comment, every time you stood by and watched while your friends tormented me, you hurt me. You all did." Jessica was finally getting back to her feet, using the storage shelves for support. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her expensive clothing wrinkled and dusty. More importantly, her aura of invincibility had been completely shattered. She looked at Maya with something approaching respect, mixed with genuine fear. "Who are you?" Jessica asked quietly. Maya smiled again, and this time there was something almost warm in it. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to actually look." "You're not just some quiet little immigrant girl," Sarah gasped from her position on the floor. "No," Maya agreed. "I'm not. I'm the daughter of a decorated Special Forces veteran who has been training in combat disciplines since I was 5 years old. I could have ended all of this on the first day you decided to make me your target. I chose not to because I believed in being better than my circumstances." She looked at each of them in turn, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time, not as untouchable tormentors, but as frightened children who had built their identity around making others feel small. "But you kept pushing," Maya continued. "You kept escalating. You turned my choice to be peaceful into a sign of weakness, and you made the mistake so many bullies make. You assumed that quiet meant powerless." Jessica straightened up, some of her old arrogance returning now that the immediate physical threat seemed to have passed. So what now? You're going to beat us all up? Turn into the very thing you claim to be better than? Maya shook her head. No, I'm going to give you a choice. The same choice I wish someone had given me months ago. She moved to the center of the room, positioning herself so she could see all three of them clearly. You can apologize, not just to me, but to every student you've ever tormented. You can use your influence to build people up instead of tearing them down. You can choose to be better. And if we don't? Sarah asked, though the question came out more like a squeak. Maya's smile turned cold again. Then I stopped choosing to be peaceful, and trust me, you don't want to see what that looks like. The silence that followed was thick with tension and possibility. Maya could see the wheels turning in Jessica's head, could almost watch her calculating the costs and benefits of various responses. Finally, Jessica spoke. You think this changes anything? Jessica said, but her voice lacked its usual venom. You think one fight makes you queen of the school? I don't want to be queen of anything, Maya replied. I just want to be left alone to get through high school like everyone else. But if you force me to choose between being your victim and being your opponent, I'll choose opponent every single time. Jessica looked at her two friends, both still recovering from their brief but decisive encounters with Maya's skills. The math was simple and stark. They were completely outmatched, and everyone in the room knew it. This isn't over, Jessica said, but it sounded more like a question than a threat. Maya stepped aside and gestured toward the door. It is if you want it to be. The choice is entirely yours. The three bullies filed out of the storage room, Jessica leading the way with whatever dignity she could muster, Sarah and Brittany following like wounded animals. Maya watched them go, feeling a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and something that might have been regret. She had broken her promise to herself. She had used violence to solve a problem that months of patience and restraint had failed to address. But as she touched her still stinging cheek and thought about the months of humiliation she had endured, she found it hard to feel guilty about finally standing up for herself. The following Monday, Maya walked through the halls of Riverside High to a completely different soundtrack. Instead of whispered taunts and cruel laughter, she was met with curious stares and respectful distance. Word of what had happened in the storage room had spread with the lightning speed that only high school gossip could achieve, though the details had been embellished and exaggerated with each retelling. Some versions had Maya as a secret government agent. Others claimed she was the daughter of a crime boss. The most outlandish story insisted she was some kind of trained assassin who had been placed in the school as part of a witness protection program. Maya found the rumors amusing rather than annoying. They were so far from the truth that they felt like stories about someone else entirely. Jessica, Sarah, and Brittany kept their distance, but Maya noticed that their behavior toward other students had changed as well. They no longer openly tormented the freshmen or made cruel comments about anyone's appearance or background. Whether this change came from genuine remorse or simple fear of consequences, Maya couldn't say, but the result was the same: a more peaceful environment for everyone. Other students began approaching Maya tentatively, some to ask if the rumors were true, others simply to say thank you for standing up to the bullies who had made their lives miserable as well. Maya realized that Jessica's reign of terror had affected far more people than she had known, and that her decision to finally fight back had created ripple effects throughout the entire school ecosystem. Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, never asked what had happened in the storage room that Friday afternoon, but she did comment on how much more confident Maya seemed in class. Other teachers began to notice Maya as well, not as a potential victim or problem, but as a student with valuable contributions to make. Maya's parents eventually learned about the situation when her father noticed the fading bruise on her cheek and refused to accept her explanation about walking into a door. When the full story came out, Carmen was angry that Maya had suffered so much in silence, while Miguel was proud that his daughter had finally chosen to use her training when it truly mattered. "You waited until you had no other choice," Miguel told her, as they practiced together in their garage dojo. "That shows wisdom and restraint. But when the moment came, you didn't hesitate. That shows courage." "I still feel bad about it," Maya admitted, as she worked through a series of defensive combinations. "Violence shouldn't be the answer." "It shouldn't be the first answer," Miguel corrected, "but sometimes it's the only answer that bullies understand. You tried every other approach first. You exhausted every peaceful option. What happened in that storage room wasn't you becoming a bully. It was you refusing to remain a victim." As the months passed and Maya settled into her new reality at Riverside High, she reflected on the lessons she had learned about strength, power, and the choice of when to use both. She had spent so much energy trying to be invisible that she had made herself a target. By refusing to set boundaries or defend herself, she had inadvertently invited increasingly aggressive behavior from those who mistook gentleness for weakness. But she had also learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others or inspiring fear. It was about having the power to choose your response to any situation. For months, she had chosen patience and restraint, even when those choices brought her suffering. When those choices no longer served her or protected other potential victims, she had chosen to act decisively. Maya never had to use her martial arts skills at school again. The message had been received and understood by everyone who might have been tempted to test her. She finished her junior year and graduated from Riverside High with honors, maintaining friendships with several classmates who had started out as strangers, afraid to associate with the weird, quiet girl. Looking back, Maya realized that the confrontation in the storage room had been a turning point not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She was not a victim waiting for rescue or a weapon waiting to be deployed. She was simply a person with the right to exist peacefully and the power to enforce that right when necessary. The girl who had walked into Riverside High, hoping to remain invisible, had discovered something far more valuable than anonymity. She had found her voice, her strength, and her place in the world. And she had learned that sometimes the most peaceful choice is to make it clear that peace is not the same thing as surrender.